Hey guys, Zeteo here. Today we're going to be doing some more AlphaCup casting. This time we're looking at Autopilot versus Teddy in the round of 4. So let's get into it.
Game started.
Alright, so we got Teddy here spawned as our Red Armada player at the bottom center. At the top center we have Autopilot spawned as our blue guy. This is Eye of Horus, which is, it's a pretty bot-favored map just because bots can traverse some of these hills here. And that becomes really important for the, this position. Like, when you take the middle position, it can be a little bit tricky to, see what's coming over here and defend against stuff coming in early on. Actually, I don't know if that's a path, but down here certainly is. Also, with the center positions here, you have to worry about, things coming in from so many different directions compared to if you took like a one of the corner expansions, or not expansions but corner positions. You only have so many different ways into that location, but yeah, the hills here are kind of a it's something to worry about. You have to really consider where you're going to place your radar. But anyways, it looks like Autopilot here opening up with a con. Meanwhile, Teddy building a con, but also has a tick out already, so getting out an early scout. Going to see where Autopilot is. Going to possibly see, if there's any kind of cheese going on pretty early on here. Meanwhile, Autopilot just now getting out some ticks, and then going straight into con after his third tick. And these ticks gonna bump heads a little bit. He sneaks by. He's gonna have to reroute this guy. I mean, it's kind of rough when your enemy gets a tick into your base while you're building a con because you don't have any guys coming off the line there. But yeah, it gets picked off by the commander. No big deal. Neither player electing to build any solar collectors so far. Wind has been pretty good. Here comes down that first radar. So yeah, just to point out, how the radar covers stuff here. These hills certainly block it. Then you got the mountains on in the center and on the side here as well. So you have to really think about where am I going to place guys to hopefully see stuff coming in, because you could certainly miss stuff if you don't have ticks or other things placed just right. Teddy or Autopilot here needs to be a little bit careful with his con. He does have a couple pawns here. This tick certainly could have threatened it for a little while, but it is sitting idle for moments. And meanwhile on the other side of the map we do have Autopilots trying to do the same thing with his own ticks. Coming in here, going to see this con, but there are some ticks in hot pursuit, so I don't think he's going to get much damage here. Let's see what P-Tac is pinging here. I don't see too much going on here. Maybe I missed something. I apologize if I did. But yeah, Teddy just sitting on a lot of ticks for defense. It looks like does have a couple out on the map. Meanwhile, Autopilots, certainly has a few more pawns mixed in here. And he does have 2 cons out expanding as well, and this is kind of tricky. If you go into pawn too early, if you don't have any ticks on defense, enemy ticks can just kind of run around, and if they're microed really well, can pick off a lot of things. So you got to be really careful. But yeah, it looks like Autopilot only losing that mech for now. Otherwise, sitting pretty good. Looking at our stats here, this tick is going to find this constructor. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, it looks like these ticks are going to find this constructor, so that's going to kind of even out a little bit. But yeah, 1 con on the right-hand side left for Teddy. Meanwhile, it looks like Autopilot taking some mexes with a second con here. This one survived, but yeah, he's going to have to rebuild some mexes. This one's being resurrected, and it becomes really important to think about all that. About just have enough units out to protect yourself. This is a nice radar here from Teddy. I'd say that there's some pawns coming in here. It looks like they're going to clean up some of these ticks, and that becomes part of the challenge if you stay on ticks too long. If your opponent gets pawns towards your base, it becomes a little challenging. Because ticks don't deal with them very well. Pawns are equal movement speed to other pawns, obviously. And so these guys can kind of run around a little bit more freely, knowing that the ticks can't really do too much about it. But yeah, on the other side here, we also have some ticks. They take out the radar. It looks like Autopilot kind of mismanaging a little bit. These ticks get past. Heading towards the base here. Pawns in pursuit, but pawns are pretty slow here. Mechs over here gets picked off once again, and these ticks maybe can do a little bit of damage here. They go for the extractor, take out the extractor, and now... okay, I kind of thought that they would at least get another wind turbine there, but I suppose not. Yeah, so I want to talk about the radar a little bit, because, you know, it is kind of an important feature of, like, where you put them on this map. And this high ground position, you know, is very important because it allows you to see guys coming in from this direction. You know, whereas, you know, a radar in your base doesn't see it all that well, so you kind of have slow reaction to that. But yeah, lots of radar out here for Teddy. Radar being just so ultra important on this map. Just a lot of radar positions to think about. Yeah, it looks like this is basically just going to get shut down here. But yeah, looking at the radar coverage on the other side of the map, looks like Autopilot either picked up or, you know, I don't know if they resurrected or if they rebuilt it, but either way, there's a radar there. There's a radar on the left here, and even a radar in the center. So just like tons of radar from both players here. One radar here, one radar in center, one radar on the right, and then also another radar in their base. So it's just like a lot of radar. Radar's pretty cheap, so it's really not that, you know, big of a deal to, you know, just make sure that you have plenty. Unfortunately, these pawns didn't idle, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on the map. It looks like Teddy's con coming out here towards the center gets picked off. That's certainly a pretty big deal. We have, it looks like 3 cons out expanding, of a 4th one building wind here. So that one's not expanding, just grab that back mechs. You know, and Autopilot's still laying down a lot of pressure here. In fact, like I say that, and there's even more pawns coming out here. You know, I think this in part has to do with just like, you know, how many ticks that Teddy got. It was a lot of ticks, but then also, I think he was a little bit slower with his expansions. You know, whereas Autopilot kind of, you know, Autopilot just like got that second con out expanding, I think, a little bit sooner here. And, you know, it's kind of kept him alive. So he's definitely in a better position here in terms of income. But yeah, pawns coming in here. There's a lot of potential damage here. This con getting picked off. The wind turbines he was building get picked off as well. Some more winds. The solar goes down even. And now Teddy's in a lot of trouble here. That's a lot of damage. I mean, certainly there's a lot of wrecks here that he can pick up, and that will certainly help him get back into the game. But, you know, has the damage been too much here? You know, I feel like it kind of has. You know, looking at the map as it currently is, there's no more cons expanding. You know, lots of cons have been picked off, and Autopilot, you know, just, you know, he's able to continue expanding, continue pumping a lot of units, and also just resurrecting the stuff that he's lost at his base. So, you know, in this position as Teddy, it's really, really difficult to come back. You know, this isn't like, you know, some big map where, you know, you can take some damage and just rebuild, and you have time to pick up the wrecks and stuff like that. Like, no, like, you got to meet the force that continuously is coming towards you. So, you know, it becomes really, really tricky to get back in this game. You know, and every res bot that you produce to try to pick these guys up with, you know, is another pawn that you don't have, or another couple pawns, I should say, because they're, you know, more expensive. So, you know, and it's also not a con. They're, you know, a little bit more expensive than a con even. So, you know, we'll see if he's able to pick up enough guys in time. So far, looks like he's just trying to, you know, continue expanding because he desperately needs metal at this point. And yeah, just, you know, Autopilot here, cranking out just tons and tons of pawns on repeat. In fact, could even use some more, you know, like even a second lab at this point. He's got enough income coming in. These mexes are rather large, so even though like it isn't like a ton of mexes, he does have, you know, this whole upper area, and that's, you know, when you're talking about 2.9 mexes, that's quite a bit of metal. But yeah, lots of you know, like threat being generated. I like to talk about it in that kind of term because you know, these pawns, if Autopilot doesn't commit them and they're just like around Teddy's base, well, that's you know, units that are threatening his base that Autopilot, or that Teddy has to deal with, and can't really, you know, go onto the map and do stuff. But we do see an air lab coming down as well for Teddy. I think this is an interesting play. I'm not sure if he's going to go for like a Hail Mary kind of play and try to snipe the commander. It looks like it is going to be Banshees. So I think that's probably the intention here. And hopefully he has enough res bots out to, you know, start picking up a lot of these units so that he has some kind of defense against the ground forces, because Autopilot here is cranking out lots of units. It looks like Autopilot's going to be transitioning into vehicle. And yeah, this is a really good timing for air. You know, like pawns and grunts can attack air. They don't do like a ton of damage to air, but they can you know, certainly attack it. Whereas vehicles, you know, you have to kind of rely on your anti-air. You have to rely on those missile trucks. So, you know, it's a little bit harder to do that. So, as long as Autopilot doesn't see the, you know, the transition here, I think Teddy has quite the opportunity. But yeah, he's got to be really careful because, like, you know, anti-air can go up pretty fast in the base, and that's where Autopilot's commander is. So if he's going for a snipe, that's going to be kind of rough, assuming that Autopilot can, you know, you know, build that anti-air rather quickly. This is a sizable amount of pawns. Looks like 24 plus all the stuff in the back here coming in. Blitz is now joining the field as well. And yeah, I mean, there's even some Rex back here he's able to pick up. So, you know, this is definitely a big threat. And, you know, I'm not even, I don't think Teddy's really, you know, he's basically going to have to sacrifice his base. I mean, actually, he's adding on a heavy transport here. So he's like totally committing to this. Gonna basically all in Autopilot here. And so with this kind of play, it's basically like, I'm going to send my Banshees, do some damage. You know, my commander can, you know, come in here and, you know, maybe we can comm trade and I'll just have more damage on your comm and win the fight. But yeah, I mean, it's spotted very early. He's already seen the transport. Oh, and look at this. Okay, so these pawns, again, they can hit air. This heavy transport's so slow, they're going to fly right over the pawns here. It's taking some damage. This is a big deal. If the commander dies in that... Oh, here comes a fighter. The commander goes down, and that's GG. But yeah, I was just going to say, like, you know, heavy transports, they can't really run away from danger. You know, and so, like, anything like, you know, obviously a fighter or whatever will take it out. And I'm actually really surprised that Autopilot had the time and the money to just build an air lab real quick to deal with that. Probably was something already on their minds, you know, and just cranked it out and starts building fighters. And then, you know, what can Teddy do? Because the whole play is shut down. But yeah, that wraps it up for this first game here. But stay tuned because we are going to go over the rest of the series. Let me just load up this replay. But a lot of talking. There's certainly a lot to say in matches like that with just pawns. And you got pawns on the left, pawns on the right, pawns down the center. You got cons expanded everywhere. And you got interesting plays like the Banshees coming online. Gets pretty tricky to like follow all the, you know, all the stuff going on. But yeah, we're jumping into our second game here.
Game started.
So this is Arxum's Cat's Valley. Teddy spawns at the bottom right here as our red player. He's playing Cortex this time. Meanwhile, we have Autopilot spawned as our blue Armada player at the top left. I've said this before, of course, in you know, other casts of this, but in case you haven't seen those, and you're wondering, this is the usual spot for starting, and that's just because there's, you know, there's plenty of metal up here. There's, excuse me, there's the, you know, the high ground kind of protects you as well. There's only 3 ways into this base. I mean, well, 3. I'll call this a half. This is like 3.5 ways into your base. And then, you know, you're pretty well protected against the early game. And then there's, you know, only 3 ways across the center of the map, which means, you know, any ticks and things that you send down these lanes will see the enemy ticks and things, you know, coming down. So you're going to feel a little bit more protected. It's going to be a little bit more con focused early on. Maybe a res bot to get some of this reclaimed. There are some rocks back here. Oh, so interestingly, Teddy has gone for a vehicle factory here. So vehicles like are slowed down even more. Like it takes longer to expand. And then your fighting force with incisors, you know, they're much more expensive than pawns and grunts. And so you're going to have a lot less forces out. And so how you expand becomes very important. Defending those cons that are more expensive becomes very, very important. You know, every little pick off here is going to be a big deal, you know, if he loses any cons. So the defense needs to be stellar against a bot player, assuming that Autopilot is, you know, going to be mounting an attack, you know, an aggressive force like the last game. This map is a little bit bigger, so you know, the aggression's not going to be quite as high, not quite as like, you know, it's going to be a very different game than our last game, is I guess my points. But yeah, first couple of vehicle constructors are out, and vehicles are more expensive on metal, so you know, grabbing these expansions early is very important, and this is kind of how you get, you know, into a good position as the vehicle player. You need to go out and grab those mexes. You need to feel kind of safe with it. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do because, you know, ticks trade pretty well with scouts. You know, and that's just primarily because of like the slower like turn speed of the vehicle, the slower turret turn speed as well. You know, so you got the unit turn speed and the, you know, the turret turn speed that factor into that. And this, as you saw there, like the tick just kind of like danced around, able to, you know, maybe deal a little bit of extra damage. And I've seen some like crazy things of, you know, one tick taking out like 2 or 3 scouts by itself through sheer micro. So Teddy's got to be really careful here. But yeah, plenty of these scouts out for defense. You know, two per tick should be okay here. Theoretically speaking, you know, assuming that the micro doesn't get totally messed up. Pawns are starting to come and join the, you know, come out onto the field now. Yeah, so far, Autopilot just, you know, 2 cons expanding, 3rd con and Commander are boosting the lab. Tick does get in the base somehow. I guess Teddy must not have been paying attention. Loses a Mex. It's a big deal. Now this Mex wreck is getting in the way of this shot from the incisor, but it does get taken out. Not a huge amount of damage, so I mean he can just like rebuild that. It's really only losing the 50 metal plus like, you know, a few seconds really. But yeah, I was kind of chilling and waiting for this game to perk up. And yeah, of course, resource management so important. This map is 2 to 19 wind, so you know, when the wind drops, you know, solar is certainly a reasonable call here. But yeah, you also need to be careful because that is a lot of metal that you're throwing down for solar when you go upwards of 2 or 3 solar. And it's not really what you want on this map. You really want wins. So I'm sure he'll probably reclaim them at some point. Oh wow, it's actually going up to a 4th solar here. That seems excessive. I would actually call this a downright mistake. Like, look at the wind speed here. Looks really, really good. Now, obviously, the solar can help out when the wind dips down, but, you know, he kind of wants the metal right now, and he could be using it to, you know, these guys could be expanding a little bit faster. They're probably slightly hindered by the lack of metal here. It looks like 4 incisors going across the map, you know, joined with, you know, a rascal here. Now, this is, like, something to be worried about because these incisors are that much stronger than pawns. You know, when you're talking about, like, 1 unit to 1 unit. In terms of cost, like, yeah, you should have a lot more pawns. But, yeah, Autopilot here is going to have to, you know, gather some troops to deal with this. He's probably going to lose this con. And even the rascal here picking off the radar, going in the back, picking off this Mex, you know, obviously that's, you know, a problem. But I think you know, the main concern here is trying to keep this constructor alive. Looks like Teddy's swooping in. Yeah, and he's going straight for the con. He's going to get the con. Loses an incisor. He's probably going to lose another incisor at least. And there's a bit of an incline here, so these tanks kind of slowing down as they try to go up this hill. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, however, we do have, it looks like he's going to lose a vehicle constructor there. That's definitely a big deal. And then also in the back, we have a tick kind of running around, taking out some mexes. And yeah, you know, that's kind of a large percentage of your mexes this early on. So that's kind of a big deal too. And then, yeah, it's also really annoying to have to get a constructor out to retake these expansions because the mexes on this map are so spread out. Looks like he manages to save one of them, but he doesn't have res bots. Excuse me. He doesn't have res bots to resurrect these mexes, so he's going to have to, re-expand there. And if it's vehicle cons, like it's really annoying to have to build an extra vehicle con when you really just want to keep making incisors and make a, sizable force to do, stronger, bigger pushes like this, where you got groups of, like somewhat larger groups of incisors. Makes it really difficult for the pawns to engage. And at the same time, yeah, Teddy doing a pretty good job here, just abusing the range of the incisors. And that's how you get the most value out of these tanky, or out of these laser units, is you use that range to your advantage. But yeah, pawn's going to be going down for the most part. Going to lose a couple of incisors, but that's some pretty good trading for Teddy here. Same thing over here in the middle, just doing a nice job, just like, keeping these tanks at arm's reach where they can attack and the pawns cannot. But yeah, it looks like, Autopilot is going to take some damage on these cons, and Teddy certainly needs to keep at it, keep that up, because, he's lost, he lost those mexes, he lost the cons, so like he really needs to keep the pressure up and keep the expansion count down for Autopilot. Is that an air lab? It is indeed. So he is going straight into an air lab. This is very early. And in fact, I would, this is actually dangerously early, because, he doesn't have that many incisors out. This is kind of a gamble. If Autopilot just keeps cranking out pawns, we're going to reach a point where there's just not enough ground forces from Teddy to deal with them. So in this kind of case, Teddy is likely to lose quite a bit of grounds because of that. So we'll see if he keeps adding on, towers to help protect his territory, or is he going to rely on shurikens or something like that to stun units. But either way, he doesn't really have that many incisors out here. Meanwhile, Commander has expanded all along this route, grabbing a lot of those mexes. That's certainly helping him out right now. His metal's doing okay now. But again, he's not going to have too much of a force here. So as long as Autopilot continues to expand quickly, he has a lot of cons out here. I think he's going to be in a little bit better shape because of this transition. Versus Teddy, who could have potentially made more, just kept adding on incisors. And really too, the other aspect of it is, incisors can trade pretty well with pawns. So if you start transitioning, you have less incisors. They're not as helpful. Here comes the shurikens, doing what they can, trying to stay out of the range, out of the ball of pawns. Incisors coming up here to protect them. And yeah, this becomes really challenging because, at the same time, the shurikens don't have a lot of health. So pawns actually deal with them pretty well. And so, trying to defend with them becomes kind of challenging. He actually has a third lab here. And I like the positioning of it, but 3 labs is kind of a lot. And this position is really, really strong, because now you can pretty easily, send units up towards the north while also sending units toward, in the south. So just a lot of different options with that. And then also, having the ability to build res bots, very useful as well. But I think Teddy here kind of relying on these cheaper air units. Because he doesn't really have, you don't really have enough income to support 3 labs. It's a lot of metal going into those labs, versus, just cranking out a lot more units. Fighter's coming out here from Autopilot, so, just his way of dealing with the shurikens. And yeah, pawn's actually jumping on this constructor. That's certainly a big deal. Takes out a mex, or I should say 2 mexes here. Loses all the pawns, but, the pawns, he probably doesn't know about, I guess, Teddy's bot lab here, so he probably thinks that losing those pawns isn't a big deal because of that, but Teddy can potentially pick this up. Another big fight here on the left, and yeah, the incisors, can trade really well when they're out of range, but if they get jumped on, pawns, can certainly abuse the, whatchamacallit, the flanking bonus, sorry. Bit of my brain turning off. But yeah, that's I don't know. It's just favoring Autopilot a little bit here, I think, because of that transition. You know, sure, the shurikens are nice to have to like help shut stuff down, but it was just transitioned into so early that, you know, with all three labs, it's just like a lot of metal that you don't have in units right now, and so it's just really hard not to lose territory, given those circumstances. So yeah, Autopilot here with quite the force. Trying to self-D this max. I feel like that self-D probably should have been on the LT, probably a misclick actually. But yeah, pawns coming in up here. Incisors for the defense, but it looks like these incisors are actually doing pretty good as the attacking group splits up, tries to take out the LT and stuff. So this is going pretty well for Teddy, and the Rex are going to be on his side. You know, and also I should probably point out that pushing up this hill is you know, makes your units slower. So just a nice defense being at the top of that hill that certainly helped out a bit there too. Aircons are out, by the way. Looks like he's reclaiming this max, this exploiter of Teddy's. Now his exploiter can fight back, but yeah, in fact he's gonna just lose the air because it happens to be an exploiter. But yeah, just a goofy little thing you don't see every day. But yeah, engagements across the map here. And yeah, I think Teddy, you know, Teddy's done a nice job just expanding and being everywhere, but it's just not keeping up with Autopilot's pressure. Just so much pressure across the map here. You know, and Teddy's forces, like the shurikens, you know, the fighters, like these are units that can't apply pressure, you know. They're more defensive units. They're more like, if you're in a good position, you know, they can help shut down stuff. So it's in a way like you don't really want to do it if you're behind. And so you know, maybe Teddy was thinking he was more ahead than he was. You know, obviously I can't speak on what he's thinking, but you know, Autopilot just doing a fantastic job, you know, with all the cons out, just re-expanding so quickly. You know, laying down pressure for Teddy. You know, some of this pressure's not working out, but it is like keeping him on his toes at the very least. So yeah, and you know, just having all these units out, I'm not sure if Teddy's really going to be able to deal with all this. You know, especially since some of these are turning into medium tanks. He has some incisors that he resurrected, and you know, this is quite the force, especially if it's microed really well. These medium tanks, you know, and incisors can do some damage from a distance. So you got to be really careful, especially since medium tanks are just so tanky. But yeah, the economy certainly favors Autopilot. I don't know what to say beyond that right now. I mean, there's this fight going on. Pawns coming in here trying to do what they can, but you know, medium tanks and, well, incisors too. You know, like just, you know, this army is just so tanky. I think it's pretty tricky. Incisors coming up trying to do what they can. Tanks are, you know, susceptible to shurikens like this. I don't see any fighters out, or at least the fighters are in a, you know, they're going towards the south here. So the shurikens doing quite a bit. But you know, overall, I don't know if it's enough. And you know, thugs coming out here, this is, you know, a really good move to do if your factory's not too far away from the, you know, from where the fighting's happening, because they are very slow. It's hard for them to get places. So you know, that's another reason why I really like that forward lab there. You know, just kind of helps produce units in this region to help defend this region and attack from this region. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this was taken out from, you know, from the shurikens and stuff, but you know, it's you know, not really enough to continue pressuring. He's probably going to back out, maybe repair up those units. You know, meanwhile, this attack up here not going so well for Autopilots. You know, and in some ways, it's sort of like, well, you know, had so much of an advantage, and now you're trying to push uphill. You know, maybe the type or style of pushing that you're doing isn't quite helping you out here. You know, it's just really hard to. You know, you're engaging with incisors with mostly pawns, and you know, they're just, the pawns aren't doing so well in an actual battle. Okay, so LDM here pointing out that there is a T2 lab on the way here, T2 vehicles for Autopilot, and I think with that, yeah, I think that was maybe the right move to maybe do a little bit earlier, or maybe just not like throw units in here. I mean, I feel like actually Teddy's being a little bit passive here too. But then again, they don't know that Autopilot's going T2, but certainly a time to kind of like poke around, feel out what's going on, you know, get some good scouting information that way and just see how big the opposing army is. And if it's not big enough, then, you know, there's something going on, such as a T2 lab. You know, but I suppose at the same time you want to be careful because, you know, you're trying to guard these wrecks, you're trying to like resurrect them, pick them up, and if you send your army in and it's the wrong choice, you know, and lose a bunch of stuff, well, now you don't have as much to, you know, defend those wrecks, defend the res bots. So, you know, just being a little careful here. But yeah, these medium tanks and things, I think will probably be able to shut this down too. But yeah, I think overall though, Teddy, you know, certainly has opportunity right now. You know, it looks like the opportunity is mostly in the middle since Autopilot's, you know, got some tanks at the north, got some tanks at the south. And yeah, okay, so they're transitioning for themselves. And I think this is where it gets kind of interesting, where it's Armada vehicle versus core vehicle T2. Some scouting going on. Okay, so he's pulling the fighters this way with the scouts. I think he's just like, it's literally just a scout. It's not like a scout plus bombers, but you know, obviously as Autopilot, you need to get your fighters over there just in case. I mean, obviously you want to take out the scouts as well, but Autopilot actually coming in here with his medium tanks, you know, doing some poking, sees this gigantic force and probably is going to lose a few things here. Maybe not. I suppose Teddy wants to be careful too, since they are going T2 and not producing units at the moment. So it's more of a, you know, just a check. I'm going to like check you, see what's going on. Meanwhile, same thing at the top here, except Teddy's the aggressor. He sees that there aren't that many medium tanks, but some more join up here. And be curious to see if he continues pushing this way. But yeah, fighting on both angles here. And I missed it, but some incisors snuck past on the bottom here, doing some damage in the back. Incisors in the middle coming up here, going for the mexes. You know, and this is really one of the dangers of going T2 so early. You know, if you're the first one to go T2, the other person is probably going to have a bigger force, especially if, you know, if they're picking up a bunch of wrecks that just happened because you fought a losing battle in their base. You know, this is certainly helping Teddy get back into the game right now. But yeah, these incisors can certainly, you know, continue pressuring, especially if they split up a bit. They don't want to fight these, though. They don't want to fight these medium tanks. And yeah, let's take a look at what's going on in the base here. It looks like Teddy just working on, you know, he's got his first mechs almost done. He's actually grabbing the Geo right away because he needs that energy. Wind is not in great shape, so that's why the E is quite low. Meanwhile, on Autopilot's side, he already has the AGO. He already has, you know, it looks like he's working on his 5th and 6th mechs right now. Alright, mechs upgrade, I should say. A couple of incisors get in the back here, so he kind of sees what's going on at this point. You know, and I don't know. I mean, doing some damage, it would be nice here, but, you know, there's so many wind turbines that are spread out that I don't think it's going to be... You know, these two incisors aren't really going to be able to take out enough to you know, do too much. But yeah, it's just kind of sitting idle here, unfortunately. Yeah, little engagements here, just, you know, some more checking, making sure that your opponent, you know, has enough stuff there, seeing if there's any T2 units out quite yet. You know, is there something that Autopilot needs to deal with immediately or not? And yeah, just kind of keeping units, hopefully at arm's length. This one's taking a little bit of damage from the thug that is on the hill, doing a little tiny bit of extra damage, or it has, you know, has a tiny little bit of extra range there. But yeah, I think this is, you know, both players are just gonna fall back. Probably the same thing on this side, but I don't know. I guess Autopilot is looking for a good opportunity to move in here. You know, stat-wise, Autopilot's certainly still in a good position. I think this was a bit of a mistake to... well, I mean, I guess it's hard to know that there's a bunch of Shuris still out here, right? Because, you know, because Teddy has been producing, you know, shurikens and fighters pretty much non-stop. And yeah, you know, I think Autopilot's certainly going to lose a lot here because of that. And there's, you know, again, more wrecks, and this is closer to Teddy's territory. You know, quite a bit of fighters out here from both sides. So, you know, we do need to, you know, consider, is there going to be some kind of bombing soon? You know, or is it just, you know, checking each other's air out, making sure that there's enough make sure that there's enough fighters out to deal with bombers. Yeah, Teddy certainly wants to start getting some of these, you know, some of this reclaim here. Autopilot doing the same thing. There are some towers here from Autopilot, so and actually the tank takes out the con there. So just a nice play there with the air cons, grabbing that stuff. There's fighter support and stuff like that too. So you know, I think he's pretty much like getting a lot of that right now. When I say that, but I suppose. You know, there are tanks and things trying to do what they can. He notices what's going on, get some fighters out there. The air cons get picked off. And yeah, so now it's uncontested again. But yeah, Autopilot certainly got a lot of that. Meanwhile, Bull's coming up the center here. You know, Bull's a nice big power unit. Tigers, you know, you can get a lot more Tigers out than Bulls. But yeah, are a little bit weaker for it. It's really important for Cortex Army to mix in things like Banishers, I think, because Bulls are you know, pretty strong here. Let's see, do we even see any Banishers? I don't think we do. Yeah, no Banishers. Yeah, no Banishers here, just the Bulls getting EMP'd, gonna be taken out. And I think this becomes a tricky part of, you know, of pushing at this stage, especially when the player has, you know, shurikens out, has their own, you know, T2 stuff coming out as well. You know, how do you push into that, because their stuff's pretty strong, your stuff's pretty strong. With air support, like shutting down stuff, it's just not likely to do too much. Autopilot even going for a second AGO here. Second AGO plus a fusion at the same time. That's certainly not really what you want to be doing. But I suppose this is pretty quickly getting done, and you know, it's like he's basically just like queuing it up, but obviously you don't have the, you know, you're not going to pay attention enough to you know, so like pause one and you know, have the other one finish first. So it's kind of just whatever. Teddy doing a little bit of transport microing around some cons to various locations. AGO is already done for him as well, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, at this point the economy can be such a mix of things. You got your resbots doing, or you know, you got guys out resurrecting stuff. You know, you got different amounts of mexes, but then different amounts of T2 mexes as well. But yeah, it looks like Autopilot here sitting on 23 upgraded mexes. And Teddy's, excuse me, Teddy's sitting on 19 upgraded mexes. AGO goes down. My apologies, I was too busy looking at the mexes to see that this was advancing here in the center. But yeah, these Tigers, you know, they are a little bit more of a pushable, or they're a little bit better at pushing than Bulls are. You know, they have a bit more, you know, because they're cheaper, it's like you can have more of them out. It's a little bit more okay to lose some of them. And so, like, sending them out like this is a little bit more okay than sending Bulls out. But yeah, it can be a lot to lose these, though. But he is getting some damage in. So, I mean, you know, Autopilot not doing the best defense. It's kind of hard with Bulls as well, because the Bulls are, you know, you just have a lot less of them. Cool guys don't look at explosions, he says. I'm not 100% sure what he's looking at, unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, even these Tigers coming up here, you know, doing a little bit of damage. I mean, it's not really that much damage though, because, you know, he's just taking out wind turbines and he's losing a $600 Tiger. So, you know, I guess the scouting information too it is valuable. But yeah, Teddy, you know, working up a nice force of things on all these fronts. You know, the front is broken, or the center here is broken. So trying to, you know, like funnel units through here to find some damage. And so this is getting a little bit dicey for Autopilot, but at the same time, you know, if these Tigers don't continue the pressure, don't deal enough damage to offset the amount of metal that they leave behind, you know, it's not really going to be helping out Teddy. I will say though, Teddy does have air dominance at this point, but Autopilot does have T2, and well, at least T2 gunships out, you know, helping to deal with some of the Tigers coming in here. But yeah, that is quite a few fighters out here for Teddy, and I think at this point, you know, Autopilot needs to be very, very careful. He's gone air, but he doesn't have enough fighters to deal with this amount of stuff. Teddy here getting kind of flacked on. Actually loses a lot of fighters, so maybe yeah, I guess that turns it all around, right? Then again, he is producing a lot of fighters very quickly. In fact, sold all the other labs here, so just going straight into the air. In fact, he's going to be building a T2 air lab here, and with that, like, he might be realizing, like, okay, you know, maybe I can rely on, you know, air dominance here, you know, like, because tanks don't hit air very well, right? You know, if your opponent has tanks and starlights thinking you're doing one thing, and then you show up with air, well, those things don't deal with air. So flak are out though, so you know, Teddy's got to be careful with that. But you know, maybe there's a play here. Maybe there's a world where, you know, fighters, you know, he gets he gets up enough fighters to absorb damage from the flak, while bombers, you know, also come in behind it and just bomb the base. You know, he probably, you know, he definitely knows that there's two fusions just sitting here. He knows that the AGO is probably taken, you know, and it's really just turned into an air battle at this point. But you know, the difference being Autopilot is certainly still making some bulls and stuff. He still has a T2 lab, so you know, the amount of air coming out here, you know, from Autopilot is just a lot less. And so there, I don't know, we'll have to just kind of wait and see what happens. Teddy even building a Screamer, a long-range anti-air, to protect this region, and that'll certainly play, you know, it'll certainly change the course of the game if, you know, if Autopilot sends in air units, you know, that just get picked off for free because they're too close to that side of things. There's probably another Screamer on this side too, I would imagine, or not, at least not yet. Bulwark coming up for defense. And yeah, I think Teddy's just kind of looking at this position like, okay, I'm going to put up T2 defenses. I'm going to make it hard for you to push in that regard. And I'm just going to go, like, hard into air. You know, with that air, you can do things like shut down these bulls. You can do things like bombing plays. You can do gunship plays. There's kind of a lot you can do. You know, and, you know, at some point, you can even, you know, you can totally do Draken plays too, you know, assuming you just have enough of other stuff to deal with it. Autopilot here, though, realizing what's going on, you know, with that bulwark, decides to come in here, you know, has those starlights, has plenty of bulls here, but it's not really a lot of units. It doesn't deal with spam too well. Lots of grunts being pumped out here from Teddy. And I think this is, you know, again, just that position of that lab is such a good one. You know, this forward position to just like help out whatever the heck's coming out here. You can quickly add on exactly the unit that you need in that situation because the lab is right there. And these bolts taking a bit of extra damage, but so is, you know, some of the stuff from Teddy. This is an anti-nuke guy right there. But yeah, same thing's going on down here. You know, the bulwark is finished though. He's a bit low on energy, so some of these lasers are not firing quite as fast as he may want. And I think this is probably going to be taken out, but yeah, the bulwark has so much hit points that you kind of need a lot to come in here. You know, and, well, okay, well, with the shurikens coming in here, I think he's going to be just fine. Air coming in here too. These are two T2 fighters. You know, so I think he's just mainly going to be sending units out this direction to you know, do this strong push now that he's kind of like broken this side. Could potentially keep these guys moving down, at least certainly I would. But yeah, a lot of the fighters for Autopilot were taken out there. Anti-air coming up here trying to support, you know, and I mean, I guess he's only used the T2 fighters up at this north side, so there's still a lot of fighters at the bottom. Looks like Autopilot has decided not to push in here, as he just doesn't have that many units. You know, again, this gets pretty tricky. If you're trying to produce out of so many labs, it's like each of the labs is producing less, and you know, making the right call on, you know, switching your units to like raiders or something like that, something faster to like just kind of support this bigger push, would, I think, have an easier time breaking this. Just having, you know, that together, the strong units plus the, you know, the you know, more agile, cheaper units that can absorb some damage for it. But yeah, it looks like Autopilot doing what they can, but, you know, again, the spam from Teddy, these grunts coming out, you know, do make it rather tricky. But there are these bulls in the back. He could potentially just swing back up here, help take out this, you know, and pinch this position. But yeah, Autopilot is in a pretty good spot here. Teddy going just like so crazy on the air. Now producing wasps to potentially deal with this. I think, okay, so Commander is cloaked here. Looks like he's probably, I mean, I don't know, like if his plan is to, I mean, I would suppose his plan is to degun the bulls, right? But if he gets rid of this anti-air, then the wasps can help out a bit. Meanwhile, up here, it looks like the bulls have broken through without the bulls down here helping out. And, oh, Teddy's Commander here just sitting here. Okay, now he's degunning. As I say, if he just sits there and takes all the damage, this could be a very sudden GG. But yeah, just lots of... Oh, okay, Teddy's going into bombers at this point. Yeah, I mean, I guess just bombers just to deal with this, because wasps don't actually deal with T2 all that well. I mean, they have more AoE than some of their counterparts, but you know, it's just not like a lot of deep, you know, single damage DPS type of thing. Fighters coming in here now. Shurikens almost go and decide not to once they see the fighter engagement here, and I think it's just kind of easier to see if we zoom out here, you know, exactly what's going on with the triangles as they fly around. Lots and lots of air cons for Autopilot, and this I like a lot. So if you're able to get a lot of air cons up, they can certainly like build stuff rather quickly. Unfortunately, some of them get picked off from the fighters. And yeah, actually, they're all going to get picked off here because Teddy just has the superior air force here. I think Autopilot misreading like just how dedicated Teddy is to air. You know, once again, not much else going on. I mean, he's even building a second T2 air lab. I think that's a bit crazy. But yeah, also has a T2 vehicle lab as well. So just lots of labs from Teddy. Teddy loves his labs. Yeah, coming in here, you know, deciding like I want a lab for every occasion. I want to be able to count, you know, directly counter what you're doing, no matter what it is, without having to worry about, you know, reclaiming labs and rebuilding labs, and you know, it becomes a lot to do all that. So, yeah, non-stop engagement here at the top as the spam comes out for, you know, from Autopilot. But yeah, meanwhile his base just having, you know, it's all the same stuff, just a couple of, you know, labs also adding on, you know, some of that spam. This tick spam will certainly help out here. Now that, you know, especially since Teddy does not have, well, I say that, but I guess he built another. He sold that T2 lab and just got a bot lab, and I'm, you know, I think that's primarily because he started seeing ticks here. These shurikens just attacking the ground apparently. But yeah, you know, this is such an interesting place. We don't often see 1v1 games like go this far on you know, oftentimes they end a little bit more abruptly. Autopilot actually sitting on an Aphis here. Actually has queued up a second Aphis at some point. Take a look at Teddy's base here. We're up to 4 fusions. Then we have 2 AGOs. And then, you know, Autopilot, let's see, I didn't count the fusions. He has 5 fusions. 5 fusions, 1 AGO, 1 safe geo. So, you know, Autopilot's sitting pretty good with that fusion, or I should say Aphis. Teddy a little bit behind on that stuff, but they're, you know, like, look at these wrecks though. That's a lot of wrecks potentially going to Autopilot. Now, you know, T2 units take a while to resurrect. So, you know, Teddy here, or Autopilot here has opportunity, especially with all these ticks. You know, Tiger's, you know, not the greatest thing for fighting ticks, especially if they're spread out, but they're not so spread out. They're taking a lot of extra damage because they're so close together. But yeah, these Starlight's trying to get some free damage on these bulls and things, but I don't think they're dealing damage fast enough compared to the resurrection, or potential resurrection. I say that as they're repairing that still instead of picking up some defenders here. What? Okay, that sucks. Okay, that I almost missed that. So Teddy had a whole bunch of wasps coming over here, and they all got shot down by this Mercury, this long-range anti-air tower. You know, I've heard plenty of people dog on the anti-air tower, or the long-range version, I should say, compared to the flak. But I mean, that range is meaningful. You just gotta, you know, remember that it's, you know, it is very useful to be able to pick off stuff so far in advance, instead of having to place them just everywhere. Shiva's starting to come out here for Teddy. T3 lab here in the center. So no more secondary T2 air lab, but still has the first one, still has the T1 air lab. Oh, I think that was a small bombing. I heard some bombs drop. I don't think it really did too much here, but you know, all those builders seem to be just fine. I'm curious to see what Autopilot's transition here is. Oh, he's going ICBMs. He's got two Aphises here. He's not actually using his T2 lab right now. I think just kind of relying on you know, relying on keeping his opponent back with ticks, and then doing something like, you know, like getting that nuke out rather fast. Now Teddy does have an anti-nuke position here, you know, so I think he's going to be okay. Yeah, I mean, pretty much the only option is to take this guy out if you hope to nuke. I suppose you can nuke the army. I mean, you can potentially nuke this forward position here if you know where this guy is, because this is right on the edge. So there's some potential there. Let's see. But yeah, at this point, like, the spam becomes so strong because they're so cheap. You know, you can kind of, you know, it's no big deal throwing away some cheap units. But then they also absorb so much damage, and it's just really hard to, like, push towards your opponent because of that. And then at the same time, they deal flanking damage, you know, causing other units to deal more damage too. So, you know, lots of that going on. But yeah, the ball of Shivas is going to be, like, picking up here. It's going to be a lot more as they're produced. Grunts, you know, basically being the tick defense here. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what Autopilot's next move is to try to close out this game. I guess just going right back into Starlights here. Starlights, you know, air units, blah blah blah. Oh, I totally missed it. Looks like a couple of Tigers get back here from Autopilot. He snuck them probably through the bottom here. But yeah, they are being shuried, but it is another thing to worry about as Teddy. And I think in this position, like, you know, if I were Teddy, I don't know, like I wouldn't necessarily feel behind. Like, it all depends on, you know, the T2 economy and how they scale it and stuff like that. But obviously a lot more territory has gone to Autopilot. You know, so I think he's just thinking, like, okay, maybe I can get through here, push past, you know, this spot using T3. You know, especially if he's forcing the Starlights to retreat. They are not attacking as they retreat because they only can fire forward. And that gives opportunity for these, you know, Shivas to maybe attack them, but the ticks come in to save them. Meanwhile, that Tiger's still alive, or at least one of them is. And wow, okay, bit of a mistake here. Splitting up his forces here. I'm thinking that some of the units are coming up this way, but they totally aren't. So the units that were stationed here just getting picked off there. Very unfortunate. It's really important, like, how you engage, you know, the army here, and just with all the ticks coming up, You know, and just having so many starlights, it's just really, really hard to engage if you don't have enough forces and support for yourself. Oh, he's moving the anti-nuke over here. Let's see. He has... Oh, okay, he has a stationary anti-nuke now as well, so he's moving that on. Teddy does get nuked. I totally... I apologize. I totally missed it, but... I'm not the best observer, that's for sure. But anyways, yeah, that forward position totally taken out here, and that's gonna take out a lot of win for Teddy, and he gives the GG. Yeah, I mean, just the position of that, you know, the anti-nuke just not being quite in position to save that. Unfortunate for Teddy there.
Battle ended.
You know, and I wonder, you know, just the positioning your anti-nuke a little differently, just remembering like, oh wait, I still have this forward position that's not protected. You know, and it's hard to remember to do that because you know, it's people don't usually go nuke in 1v1s, right? So it's not really something on the forefronts of your mind. But anyways, that sums it up for those two games there. I hope you guys enjoyed watching my take on what happened. And yeah, I'll be continuing to do the rest of Alpha Cup as well. So I hope you guys learned something. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.